Hello, you're with Echelon, navigating a balance sheet. How People's Bank is positioned for a post-crisis Sri Lanka. In the studio with us today on Turning Point is Clive Fonseka, the Chief Executive of People's Bank.
People's Bank was in the forefront in supporting the nation and the general public. Right now, dollars or even at rupees, we are at a very strong liquidity position. We believe that there's potential for us to lend to the corporate sector, SMEs, even retail banking. We have come a long way in our digital drive. So then we want to position ourselves as the preferred partner for the government entities, even local government entities, and even schools all the government. Right now, about 75% of the transactions happen through the digital channels right now. We recently had the 2 millionth digital customer, so that is by far the highest among any banks in Sri Lanka.
Clive, it's good to have you join us at the Echelon studio. And you're joining us at an interesting time for the banking sector because from a few days before this recording, we've had the national budget being presented for 2024. There's several interesting proposals there. I think I'll be remiss if I don't start with that. And that is, there is a proposal for a strategic investor into the two state banks, that is People's Bank and also perhaps Bank of Ceylon. As CEO, what is the bank's position? What is the management's position? How will you take this forward?
Thanks for the opportunity, Shamindra. This share issue of 20% was there the last year's budget also. So as far as the People's Bank is concerned, our owner is Ministry of Finance. So we'll closely work with them, and once the budget is passed, so probably we'll have to change the People's Bank Act, and that will have to go to the Parliament. But however, what I can assure is basically there'll be discussions. I think it's far too premature to tell at this point of time as to give any timelines or how it will happen. So it's basically work in process as of now.
So for you to accommodate an outside shareholder, the law under which the bank is operating will have to be changed for it to operate under the Companies Act. How does it work?
So right now we go under the People's Bank Act that was passed in the Parliament in 1961. So here, as per this act, the shareholder is the government of Sri Lanka. So then, likewise, and there will be some other aspects also. We'll have to get amended. So we will basically inform Ministry of Finance as to the requirements, as to the changes required. Then probably there'll be a discussions between both state banks and the Ministry of Finance. Then they will take this forward.
Right. Alongside that proposal to accommodate a strategic investor, there is also a proposal for a 450 billion rupee recapitalization fund for the banking sector. It doesn't specify what it is meant by the banking sector. Do you anticipate People's Bank will also require some of this money?
See, as of now, our capital is one of the highest in the industry.
Right.
Capital adequacy ratio is total capital adequacy ratio is about 16%, Shamindra.
And you're required to have a capital adequacy
13.5.
Right.
So, if the background to this is there was the central bank conducted this asset quality reviews. So then they have done this for about 8 or 10 local banks. So this then apparently from this exercise they have envisaged some sort of a capital shortfall. So this is sometimes on extreme situations. So we do not know as to how this 450 billion will be allocated to the banks, as to which banks will be eligible, and some of the banks we might not be eligible, and some banks will be eligible for this. It's far too premature for me to discuss this right now, Shamindra.
So in both these matters, it's also, while it's premature, also there is no clarity about a time frame from where you're sitting. There is no clarity about a time frame for both the recapitalization and the strategic investor.
No. So probably discussions will happen very soon. So then, as per the instructions of the Ministry of Finance, who's the owner of the bank, so bank will have to take this forward.
Right. Thank you for those clarifications, because I think the market is very curious about how the recapitalization and potential strategic investor will transform the sector, right? And Clive Fonseka, you're joining us at an interesting time. Interesting because after several years of lackluster performance, Sri Lanka's economy may be showing the first green shoots of a recovery. As a CEO of one of the largest balance sheets in the financial sector, right? How does a potential recovery, how does the visibility of a potential recovery change your approach to how you're going to manage your balance sheet?
As a state bank, People's Bank was in the forefront in supporting the nation and the general public. As a result, we were faced with liquidity issues because we were called upon for the to supply of the essentials. So we have taken some very hard decisions and we've come out of it. So right now, dollars or even at rupees, we are at a very strong liquidity position. So along with this improvement in the economy, we also subscribe for the same view as you said. So then we believe that there's potential for us to lend to the corporate sector, SMEs, even retail banking. And so then there'll be one of the initiatives of the government was the digitalization of this budget. So then because People's Bank, we have come a long way in our digital drive. So then we want to position ourselves as the preferred partner for the government entities, even local government entities, and even schools or all the government entities, because we have a very strong relationship with them. So it's basically to attract them to utilize our digital services. It could be payment gateways, POS terminals. So that will be the immediate strategy.
So essentially, after supporting the government through a very difficult time to finance imports of petroleum and keep
Coal,
utilities,
fertilizer,
right,
pharmaceuticals.
Sure. So from what you're saying, it sounds like, and that would have caused a severe strain on your liquidity position. From what you're saying, it looks like you're in a fairly different position to what maybe you were 6 months or a year ago?
Yes. See, what happened was we realized People's Bank have been traditionally an importer's bank. So we did about 50% of the oil imports. All the coal imports were done through People's Bank, fertilizer, pharmaceuticals. So then we took measures to increase the inflows of the foreign exchange. So within a year, we have almost more than doubled the foreign remittances share to the bank.
Right.
And then even exports, it's the same. So this we want to keep this trajectory, this momentum going, so that we will not have to face the same situation in the future.
Sure, right. So from your last answer also, I'm gathering that hey, you're readying now for expansion in credit, right? When you're looking at this potential expansion in the economy of credit, as People's Bank, where do you think your opportunities will come?
See, as per the proposed Banking Act, there'll be limitations on the SOE lending.
Right.
And the other thing is, even on we expect the single borrower limits also to decrease considerably from the present levels. So then there'll have to be a business model change. So as for the People's Bank is concerned, so we will be compelled to utilize these inflows and lend to the corporates, SMEs, retail customers. So we are gearing ourselves to that. So right now we are in the capacity building exercise. So that, along with this approval of the Banking Act, so we will be prepared to act and bank will get the maximum advantage of that.
Okay, so that's very interesting. So to take advantage of these changes that are happening, you have to alter the structure or alter how the bank approaches lending and customers, right? So from a big picture point of view, from where you are, how do you get about setting priorities and doing this? You said you are building capacity. How do you approach this? Where do you start and what are you doing?
See, first of all, it's a HR. So
Right.
we need to have the proper staff to evaluate this credit, and then it has to be from the corporate banking, then to the branch. So we have set up credit units at the regional. We have 24 regional centers, then even at branches. So what we've done is, Shamindra, there's right now about 75% of the transactions happen through the digital channels right now. So we are doing everything possible to increase this, so that the number of, so that few, at least one or two staff in the branches, so they can concentrate on lending.
Right.
So
You said 75% of transactions are digital now.
yes.
Wow. Wow. That must be one of the highest ratios in the industry.
Yes. So we recently had the 2 millionth digital customer.
Wow.
So that is by far the highest among any banks in Sri Lanka.
Sure. So I interrupted you when you were talking about how you're going to do this transformation. So you're talking about the regions and the branches.
Yeah, that's on HR. So then then on the other hand, we need to, even at the HR, even at the head office level. So even with the risk management department, yeah, so it's like a whole package. So HR is number one. Then basically we are looking at other aspects also. We have implemented a sales team, so that even for the exports, imports, or even any short-term facilities, and also their structure. So they are there to support the branches. So we have the highest number of branches in Sri Lanka. So a lot of customers approach us. So then if the branch per se, they do not have the skills, so then we have this sales team that they will go and accommodate and speak to the customer and see what is best to them.
So this is, it looks like you're investing in digital is paying off in an unexpected way, or at a pace now that you possibly didn't imagine when you made those investments. Is that a fair assessment?
See,
or this is
we started the digital journey in 2016.
Okay.
So it's about 6 or 7 year journey. So actually, my personal view is there's much more potential for us because we do even there's room for corporates, for us to move into corporates also by digital. See, right now, digital is mostly in our bank is utilized by the retail customers. So our next step would be to go to the corporates and even opening of LCs and imports exports to these digital channels.
If you take a slight step back and look at, Sri Lanka's SOEs, like we were discussing, have had a fairly significant exposure to debt, particularly because of the crisis in the economy over the last few years. And I think the state banks have been a disproportionately high lender to SOEs. And I think that narrative is now changing. Commodities and services are priced at cost plus margin, it looks like. And it may be that these SOEs are now more liquid than they were in the past and don't require as much support. This would free up potentially a lot of assets in the sector in general. So if you take a step back, now you talked about the bank, look at the sector in general. What do you anticipate will happen in the financial sector because of the deleveraging potentially in these SOEs?
Shamindra, most of the lending to SO is done by the two state banks.
Sure.
Private banks, basically, they'll be impacted because as per the new Banking Act, their single borrower limits will be decreased. So then they'll also be compelled to look at new customers. Then on the other hand, now central bank has this new concept along with the Banking Act, interdependency. So if the companies are interdependent, so the single borrower limit will be less in actual sense. So then it will be it will be broad basing of the lending line. So that's inevitable.
So People's Bank, like you mentioned, is transforming to meet its new set of objectives and challenges, right? I'm sure as CEO, Clive Fonseka, that you spend a lot of time looking at your balance sheet, several lines on your balance sheet, right? You're looking at your assets, you're looking at your liabilities, you're looking at your liquidity. And as CEO, what do you anticipate will be the most challenging of these items that you look at in the balance sheet to manage? Obviously, you're looking at the P&L too, but balance sheet, I suppose, is where most attention goes to. What aspects do you think will be most challenging generally?
We have seen an increase in the NPAs, non-performing loans.
Loans.
So that is an area that we are very concerned. So we are very closely monitoring that, and we recently implemented a rehabilitation unit. So they go and speak to the customer. We have done a lot of restructuring and rescheduled the facilities. We provided some moratoriums if there's been a genuine case, and then actually we have revived quite a number of facilities.
Right.
That is something that we will continue. So that has been the number one issue that we are concerned on. Then apart from that, interest rates had been quite volatile. So we are because we faced the issue when the interest rate unexpectedly went from single digits to 30%. So even for these fixed facilities also, that is another concern of us. So we generally, as you know, most of the retail loans are generally on fixed interest rates. So that is also another concern for us. Most of the corporate loans, we are not too much worried because that is basically on the AWPLR plus margin. So that we are fine because our funding also will be on the basis of the AWPLR minus. So deposits are raised at those levels. So we are not overly worried about that.
It's interesting that you should bring that up. So it looks like you're funding the book currently at a lower price than the cost because you're lending at how much more than what you're funding it at?
It varies depending on the credit. So generally it's AWPLR based. So if it's fixed retail loans, it starts from around 15.5, 16 levels. So these tenors varies from 3 years, 5 years, 8 years like.
Sure.
So now banks maximum that we pay to raise deposits will be in the range of 12.5 because generally we are quite liquid now.
So there is no desperation to up the rate for short-term liquidity.
That's right.
I'll roll back slightly the conversation to the non-performing portfolio. In the sector, we know non-performing is 13.5% approximately.
That's stage 3.
Stage 3 non-performing. Okay. Is there a number that you have for the sector for both so-called stage 2 and stage 3?
Generally, we go by the stage 3.
Yes.
So ours is slightly high because we've been very conservative and some of the facilities we pushed it onto stage 3.
Sure.
So.
Right. So when you're sort of working with your customers to sort of revive these loans, you're possibly working with many customers, both who are, dispersed along a large area of the country, all over the country, and maybe most of these customers are SMEs or even micro enterprises, right? What is challenging about doing it that way? There may be other banks that have large private sector customers who are in trouble. I mean, for instance, hotels have had a torrid time in the last few years. But your customers who are facing difficulties may be different to that. Are they?
More or less the same. So SMEs, we know that most of the SMEs are going through a very tough time. So to the best of our ability, we provided them concessions. So now we are talking with them to restructure the facility. So those discussions are ongoing. So I wouldn't see a differentiation between the private bank and a state bank with regard to the SME clients. So most of the clients are the same.
But most of your non-state lending assets must be with SME and micro clients, whereas for some other private banks, they may have fairly large corporates also.
So we also have a private sector corporate banking quite a significant portfolio. Actually, our SMEs portfolio is less than that. So
Oh,
we
right.
also, our corporate banking section is also quite strong. So most of the blue chip corporates, we have a very strong relationship.
So, Mr. Fonseca, from where you're sitting, you have to both look at these so-called proposals for changes in, with recapitalization, accommodating a strategic investor in state banks in the short term. You're looking at your balance sheet closely. You're also looking at how you can sort of navigate or transform your business in the short term to meet new challenges. But you also have the burden of having to look at the long term. You can't be looking at 6 months or 1 year only. You have to be sort of putting forth a strategy that looks at least 5 years, right? When you have time to do that, what are you think your priorities now?
See, as I mentioned earlier, it's mainly the change in the business model, Shamendra.
Right.
So we will be compelled, as per the new Banking Act, to diversify. So otherwise, there'll be a drastic reduction in our assets or the loans and advances. So we want to keep up the momentum. So we have the capacity to utilize those funds, whatever inflows from these SOEs to the private sector and to the sectors that I mentioned earlier, like SME, retail customers. And because of the large number of branch networks, we have about 745 branches and service centers. So we have the capacity also. So going forward, will be, as I said, that when the inflows from the foreign exchange is quite robust, we will look at import customers, trade finance customers also. So it's going to be a whole mix.
Sure. People's Bank had strong ROE, return on equity. For several years now, it's been having strong ROE because of the composition of its book, I suppose. This is how confident are you, and what are the challenges in maintaining that level of ROE performance?
See, this year and next year is going to be challenging because we also PNL is under tremendous pressure.
Sure.
Due to due to the economic conditions in the country, because we were compelled to give some concessions to the customers. But I'm quite confident from around next year onwards, once the economy starts to improve and the things starts to settle, that we will be able to match the same previous levels. So at least this year there will be a significant reduction compared to last year and the year before.
What do you think you need to get right? I mean, we talked about maybe some of those aspects like digitization, keeping costs under control, etc. Right? If you look at those aspects, do you think those are the ones that are going to be crucial for you to have a cost advantage, and as a result, maybe higher returns also?
That is one thing, but the main thing would be the change in the business model. So we will be compelled, because otherwise the margins will be very much less and bank will not be there will not be any growth. So we will continue with all those. Then in the meantime, so we'll be compelled to look at whatever alternates to deploy these funds, whatever the inflows that we are getting from the SOEs.
Sure. So it's very clear when we're having, I'm having this conversation with you, Clive, that top of mind for you is this business model transformation. Now, you mentioned that at least in 4 different answers that you get, that this is the number one thing you need to get right. What do you think are the crucial factors so if you look at the team that you have, what is their role here? And where do you think they need to get stuff right for you to be able to achieve this?
See, we have a fairly young team at People's Bank, but they have quite experience. So they have the experience. Some of them have branch experience, corporate banking, treasury, risk management. So it's a case of working as a team and to have a clear strategic direction. That is the most important thing. It's not a case of not having the experience, not the capability. It's basically everybody will have to work as a team.
So you have a rich mix of youth and experience at the same time.
Yes.
Right. And I'm trying to understand it in a very practical sense, right? There may be a team member who's listening to this. There may be somebody else who's interested in this transformation who's listening to this. Is it a technical skills that you're looking at that be enhanced? Is it an attitudinal change? What sort of a transformation in terms of people are you looking at?
See, technical skills they have.
Right.
So it's mainly the soft skills and the attitude.
Right. So you want to create teams that are more capable of evaluating loan proposals, lending on cash flows, stuff like that?
Yeah, and the sales culture. That
Right.
is something that we want to inculcate, and and the customer centricity also. So we want to look from the customer's perspective as to what is convenient for them and to provide solutions for them. So that is the future for the bank.
Right. It from what I'm hearing from you, it looks like you're less concerned about how you're going to attract deposits, right? But this seems to be a far more crucial thing to get right than the
Yeah, I
other.
think that we've come a long way. Earlier we had major issues with regard to the liquidity,
Right.
rupee and dollars. I think we've come, so we've overcome that. Now it's a case of, because of the branch network and the government ownership, attracting deposits is not a big issue for us, because invariably we have a lot of accounts. We have 14 million accounts, so a lot of salaries are channeled towards People's Bank. So it's we are okay with that. There's not an issue there, deposits wise.
So when you look back at the founding principles of the bank, this was the first state bank that was
Bank of Ceylon
preceded you, but that was a private sector bank that was then taken over. But yours was founded as a state-owned bank with a mission.
Yes.
How do you feel you're doing versus that mission right now?
I think we've been very successful because we work very closely with the rural Sri Lanka, because that's why we maintain 745 branches and service centers. Some of them are economically not viable, but if we close those branches, the customers in those areas, they'll have to go 25 kilometers, 30 kilometers for a bank.
Sure.
And some of them are not, they do not have the capacity to do digital transactions. So I think we've been very successful in achieving the initial objectives, so that we are doing. So we work very closely with the cooperatives. That's also one of the objectives. So that's why we have the highest number of customers of this country, 14.5 million customers.
As we wrap up this conversation, Clive, is there anything that you think you want to sort of add to round off this interview?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, we are at a very exciting time. So, I'm very bullish about the future. See, if we do it right, I think People's Bank will be a force to be reckoned with. So, I'm quite confident that we are in a position to do that.
And you have, as testament, 14 million customers who are consistently banking with you, and 2 million of them are on digital.
Yeah.
On a digital
By far
platform.
the largest, yeah.
Right. When you say 14 million customers, does that include corporate or SME customers and individuals?
Including include children and all. So I would say about 9 to 10 million active accounts.
Wow. So that's almost half of Sri Lanka's population.
Yes.
Wow. And 2 million of those 9 to 10 million are on a digital app.
Yeah.
Performing up to 75% of transactions online. Wow,
yes.
that's a formidable position to be in. Clive Fonseka, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming in and joining this conversation.
Thank you, Shamindra.